All right, today we are diving into one of the most foundational and, let's be honest, most debated blueprints in the history of software development. We're talking about the waterfall model. So let's get into it and see what really makes this thing tick. It's a really fundamental question. How do you build something super complex without it just descending into total chaos? Imagine for a second trying to build a skyscraper without any kind of plan. You'd have electricians showing up before the foundation is even poured, painters arriving before there are even walls. It would be an absolute mess. Well, building software, it's really no different. You've got to have a process. And just like that skyscraper desperately needs a blueprint, software development needs a structured plan to get you from a cool idea all the way to a finished, working product. And that plan, that's what we call a software process. So let's get a bit more specific. What is a software process? Well, it's exactly what you see here, a structured set of activities. You can think of it as the rulebook or the recipe, or maybe the roadmap that teams follow to make sure everyone is pulling in the same direction, in a nice, orderly way. Now, it doesn't really matter which specific process you use, pretty much all of them are going to have these core activities. You have to figure out what to build, then how you're going to build it, then you actually have to, build it. After that, you check that you built the right thing, and finally, you have to keep it running and update it. On the surface, it's a really simple logical flow. So the big question is, how do you organize these logical steps? And that brings us right to our main event, the waterfall model. This was one of the earliest attempts to bring some of that formal, engineering-style discipline to the, let's say, sometimes chaotic world of writing software. In this picture, this illustrates the core idea perfectly. Just like a real waterfall, the flow is always downwards. You start at the very top. You have to complete a phase entirely, and only then do you get to cascade down to the next one. The most important rule: there is absolutely no swimming back upstream. These phases are really distinct and totally sequential. First, you define every single requirement down to the last detail. Done. Then you design the entire system. Done. Next up, you write all the code. After that's finished, you test the whole thing. And finally, you go into operation and maintenance. Each step is just this massive, self-contained block of work that has to be 100% complete before the next one can even begin. So, this incredibly rigid, step-by-step structure is both the model's greatest strength and its most famous, or maybe infamous, weakness. It brings order, for sure, but that order often comes at a pretty significant cost. And here it is, the absolute crux of the issue, stated perfectly. What happens if, say, halfway through the project, the customer has a sudden realization and says, "Oh no, we missed a key feature"? Well, in a strict waterfall model, trying to accommodate that change is incredibly difficult, and you can bet it's going to be very, very expensive. This right here is the golden rule of the model, and it's also its biggest problem. Once a phase is done and signed off, it's basically frozen in time. If you want to make a change, you pretty much have to start the whole process over again. Which, let's be honest, is usually not practical. Like we said, you just can't swim back up the waterfall. Okay, so with a major flaw like that, you might be wondering why anyone ever used this model in the first place. And that's a fair question. But it's not all bad. So let's do a little reality check and really look at the pros and cons side by side. You can see the clear trade-off here, can't you? On the one hand, its strengths are a project manager's dream. It's simple, it gives clear milestones, it's great for planning and tracking budgets. Awesome. But its flaws? Whoa, they can be a developer's and a customer's worst nightmare. It demands that you know everything up front, it totally kills flexibility, and the customer doesn't see a single piece of working software until the very end, when it might just be too late to make any meaningful changes. So what's the final verdict on all this? Well, the waterfall model isn't obsolete. You should think of it more like a specialized tool. It's just not the right tool for every single job, especially not in the fast-moving world we live in today. So the question becomes, when should you go with this particular flow? This model really shines in situations where uncertainty is super low. If your requirements are crystal clear and totally stable, say you're just making a new version of a product that already exists, or you're moving software to a new platform, this plan-driven approach works beautifully. It's also really useful for huge projects spread across different locations, where having a rigid plan is sometimes the only way to keep everybody on the same page. And that really leaves us with one last fundamental question to think about. The waterfall model forces us to ask, For any given project, what's more valuable? Is it the safety and control you get from rigid, upfront planning? Or is it the agility you get from flexible, continuous adaptation? The answer, as we've seen, really truly depends on what it is you're trying